Okay, in today's demonstration, I'm going to show painting with a string to create a structure that then I'm going to paint in with a gradation of paint mixtures. And I picked kind of an odd combination. I picked this Provence blue, it's kind of lavender, and this manganese hue. I have no idea what it's going to look like. I'm curious. So basically I have one that's a little bit darker and lighter, so you could say I'm tinting or shading these colors to create a gradation. Okay, for the string painting, and you can use this, it just needs to be liquid paint. You can use this Craft Smart that's reasonably priced. Mine is getting a little old, so I'm going to use this golden, I think it's a high flow acrylic. And if you don't want to use black, if you have a color, that's fine too. I think that would be interesting. But I'm going to use the black just because you can see it better. And what I like to do, it should be a cotton cord, so it absorbs the paint. And I usually hold that string down with a brush and then pull the string through. I'd have to do it a couple times. You want it pretty well saturated, certainly the first go around. Okay, then I take my string, get a little bit more there. And this is kind of random. I can pull it tight and I can make super straight lines. I can let it loop a little bit more and get curved lines. But what I'm really going for is having lines cross, so I'll get random shapes that I'm going to use as my structure to paint in my color mixtures. And you can think of the line as gesture or movement, or I like to call it compositional rebar. Like, you know, when they're making a building, they've got the structure that holds building together. And if you struggle with this, you know, you could also just draw it in, but my preference with that is a continuous line, meaning you start at one end and you don't lift your pencil till you're done to get shapes. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to set that aside. And then I actually have another one already complete, kind of cooking show style, that after I've done my mixtures, I'll paint that in. Okay. So very quickly, if you choose to make your, what do you call this? It's it's swatches on canvas paper. I cut these on my paper cutter. So as I get new paints, I just keep adding to it. They're not mixtures. It's what's out of the tube. It's my reference. I can take these off my clip. I can tape it on a painting to see, do I want to add purple there or yellow? So here's how I make them. I've got my little swatch here. I punched a hole in it and I wrote the name of the color. Could also write the brand name if you want. And then I just take my angled palette knife and I scrape my paint on there. Now that's fairly light, so I can make it thicker or more opaque impasto on one end. And then I just set that aside to dry, and I'll put it on my ring later. Okay, now I'm going to go into mixing color. So what I like to do is put, usually the lighter color, I put a larger amount. And on the other end, I'm going to put a lesser amount of this manganese, and I'm going to slowly add it to that Provence blue. And then I'm just going to put my mixtures on this piece of, it's a thin drawing paper, but when it's dry, I'll cut a strip and I'll put it into my color dictionary. Okay. So I usually put a swatch of each pure color at either end, and then I'm going to mix my gradation from one side to the other. So this is manganese into this sort of lavendery purple. So I like the angled palette knife. I scoop and then I kind of flip it over until I don't see any streaks. And then I put a blob. And then the thing I always forget, you have to remember this while you're working today, is to take some of that paint mixture and reserve it or save it off to the side on your palette, because I'm going to be painting in my string painting with that. Okay, then a little bit more. And you can do as many gradations as you want. I think I'm just going to do 3. Work a little bit more quickly. Okay, that's getting a nice blue cast to it. Saving some paint down here at the bottom. And I'm going to bring it up more quickly. I'm going to add a lot more. Now it's turning over to a more bluish paint. Quite nice. I like that. Okay, I lied. I'm going to do a little bit more, see how far I can push it. And what I like about people coming up with their own mixtures is that then if you see something you like, you can ask your fellow students, make note of it, and use it in your work. Okay, here we go. Okay, I like that. All right, so I would let this dry, the strip, and then when it's dry, I would neatly cut it and put a strip into my color dictionary, and then I label on one end, you know, manganese blue and then Provence blue. And I've got this really nice color dictionary reference. And then today I'll paint in my string painting. And then what I did is I cut sections of these so I can reference them and go, oh, that's how all the paints look together. I can reference that. Do they work well together? Okay, so here is my previously created string painting. And it may feel to some of you like, oh, it looks a little coloring bookish, but next week I'll show you, we'll take it in another direction where you remove the lines. If you just have paint and no lines, but shapes butting up against each other, it'll be a different look. We'll talk about that. But for now, this is a helpful structure to work with. And what I'm hoping you'll do is play with different consistencies of paint. So this manganese is already kind of transparent. I'm adding a bit of water. So it remains transparent. And I tend to work just very spontaneously in the round. Okay, I'll put a blue here, I'll put a blue here. Quick decisions.
Laura, what size is your paper?
I think it's 11 by 14.
Okay.
Yeah. And that choice is yours too, you know. You can also go to canvas if you want. Okay, so we have wash. Then let's see. I can paint directly with my palette knife. And for this, I hold it at, it's about a 45-degree angle, and then just scrape. And you can put it on really thick, or you can carve through it so I can see below. More textural. You can play with crossing over the black line. Let's see. Going right up to the black line. And then if you have scraping tools, like I bought this palette knife that's got teeth in it, then I can scrape through and get some textural pattern going on. Once this dries, like I'll come back later and I'll show you, once this dries, I can use a dry brush with some paint and come across it, and the top edges will pick up whatever that color is. So far I've done solid shapes. There's no reason why you can't go with some patterning. Okay, if you want to use a brush, you could continue the patterning. And then I could bring in another color in those stripes and see how color interacts when it's side by side with no line. Going over transparency with different color paint. And scratch in, called sgraffito, with the back of your brush or some sort of scraping implement. That brush has got problems. Okay. Color next to color. Different feeling when there's not the black line there. There's no water on this brush, so that's what you call dry brush. Just take a little bit of paint and then I'm dragging it. Again, that 45-degree angle. There's a different feeling. You kind of scrub your brush around. Same thing, thick paint, no water. This is impasto, scraping it or delivering it 45-degree angle. If I scrape through, then I get kind of a sharp shapes. And I feel like it's like excavation, you know, especially if another color under there and you scrape, you're kind of excavating to a lower level. If you don't like it, put your paint back. And then all of these areas that are thicker and more, like I'm purposely now texturing this more, almost like someone plastering their wall. I'll show you right down here. Yeah, so that's thicker, more textural. When that dries, again, I can drag a brush across that with another color and I'll pick up on all that really interesting texture. I'm trying to think, is there anything else I could show you here? Oh, okay, I just remembered. So this was last week. I think, Peggy, you had, not sure, it was like a netting. This is from a bag of potatoes. So normally I would tape this down so it doesn't scooch, but what I'm going to do is take this makeup sponge, get some paint on there. You want it pretty even. You don't want big blobs. And then I can sponge through that to create, you know, an interesting texture. So yes, we're painting with brushes, but you can also use non-traditional means. I'm going to do some over here on top of this blue and see what we get. Well, kind of obliterated it. Where did it go? Yeah, I kind of obliterated it. Let me go lighter in another area. Let's see. Where did it go? Where did it go? Oh, right here. Okay. You can also push these makeup sponges down and kind of smear and draw directly with them. And then, of course, if you're really in the flow, you can use your fingers. Why not? Okay, I think that's it. I'm going to end and then come back and see if you have questions.